Hi, everybody. We are going to wait a couple minutes just to let a few more folks join the call. So just hold tight for a minute and then we will get started. All right, well, hi again, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. We may have some others who will join the call. So first of all, if you can hear me, just like wave your hand or show me that you can hear me. Excellent. Oh, I love it. Okay. I'm Jessica Wergo. I'm with the Community Foundation of the New River Valley, and I am going to be kicking us off, welcoming everybody, and then turning it over to some really great speakers for the day. So welcome to this quarterly session of First Steps via Zoom. We're excited to be able to offer this and get some great resources for all of you on what's happening right now amidst COVID-19 when it comes to early childhood education in the state, broad issues that we can look at, as well as what First Steps individually is doing. And many of the folks who've been part of First Steps are on the call and have been doing some great work to continue the momentum of the network and provide supports for everybody during a pretty uncertain time. So a couple things as we get going here. First of all, that's me, so I'm doing welcome, of course. So thanks everybody for taking the time to be a part of it. So as you're on the call, just try to mute your microphone if you would when you're not speaking, just so we don't get background noise. And I see many folks are already doing that, so thank you so much. If you have a question that comes up, you can use the chat feature of Zoom. So that should be in the kind of taskbar that comes up when you sort of scroll to the bottom of your screen. Just go ahead and type those questions in, particularly for the presentation we're going to have from Emily. It'll be good to get those questions in and then have a few minutes to answer those at the end of her remarks before we move forward. For those who might not be familiar with First Steps, I just wanted to give you kind of the quick overview. So many of you have been involved, but those who need a refresher, this is a network that we started in the community back in 2016, focused on supporting early childhood education and development broadly defined. And through a series of community meetings and discussions that we've had for many years, we focus in these three priority areas around increasing knowledge about and access to available services through an information hub, identifying shared values and speaking with a common voice about the importance of early childhood, and finally, supporting and strengthening the early childhood education and development workforce. And so you'll hear tonight some updates from the different work groups in these particular areas, what they're doing to continue their activities during the social distancing, I should say, but then also what they're doing to support you all amidst the coronavirus and special things that we maybe didn't anticipate, but are important needs right now. Also, I should say that I am recording this particular video, so we will be able to post it to our website, and so you can go back and listen to the remarks again, and then we'll also post the PowerPoint, which has, as you'll see later, a couple links to some additional resources, and you can take a look at that as well. So with that, our agenda for the day, we're going to hear first from Emily Griffey with Voices for Virginia's Children. So thank you, Emily, so much for being a part of today. And then during the second half of our meeting, we will do some updates from the work groups and some closing remarks. So I am actually going to turn it over to Katie Thompson with our Info Hub group, and she is going to be our MC for the evening. And I will be the official mover of PowerPoint slides. Thanks, everybody.
All right. We'll just again to welcome everyone and thank you for getting on what I'm sure is your 2000th Zoom call of the day. So we really appreciate that you guys made time and are putting in the energy to come back with us again this evening so that we can kind of just talk through what we've got going on with First Steps and make sure that we are being a meaningful resource during this time, and that we as a team are really aware of what's needed. As Jess said, we're going to work through several different things tonight in that nature, but we are going to start with some information from Emily Griffey, and she is the Policy Director for Voices for Virginia's Children. So they've been doing, you've seen lots of emails, anyone in the field has been getting emails and information from Virginia's Voices for Virginia's Children, which has been giving advice and suggestions and best practices and research. So we really appreciate that Emily's taking the time this evening to just give us, it's not a deep dive, but some basic information on what's available and what they've been doing. If you have questions or comments during this time, we are tracking the chat box. So again, that's at the bottom of your screen. If you just move your mouse around or touch your screen, if you're using a phone, it should pop up and give you that chat option. And we'll be monitoring that so that if there are questions or things that are just really pressing at the end, then we may have a little bit of time to share some of that or ask Emily a few questions. So without further ado, Emily, we will pass the microphone to you.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I unmuted myself. Great. It's good to see some of you all virtually. I see some names and faces that I recognize. If you're not familiar with Voices, I'll give you an overview, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what was our agenda for the legislative session this year, where things stand now post-COVID, and some immediate actions today, and then what you can kind of be prepared to be looking for in the future in terms of advocacy and policy work. So for those of you who are not familiar with Voices, we are the multi-issue child advocacy organization in the state. So our agenda is broader than early childhood education. We also work on child welfare issues, we work on mental health issues, and we have our campaign for a trauma-informed Virginia. So while I'll primarily be focusing on how the early care and education policies are impacted, I do encourage you, if you are interested, if you are connected on those other topics, to connect with Voices on those other topics too, because children don't really grow up in one system. As we know, in the early childhood world, they really intersect with all of these. So in terms of our work this General Assembly session in 2020, we are coming off of historic wins for early childhood education, where the legislature approved over $85 million over the 2-year budget to expand access to BPI, to provide teacher incentives, and to incentivize public-private partnerships to serve more at-risk 3- and 4-year-old children. As you know, since the coronavirus has spread and wreaked havoc on our health system and our economic system, the governor announced last Saturday, I believe, days are all blending together at this point, I'm sure you understand, a few days ago, that the state would be putting a freeze on all of those new spending legislative items this year. So the expansion of early childhood education is one of those items that now gets put into the freezer for the time being and put on pause. So what that will mean is that that spending will not be authorized until the state gets some revised revenue projections, as well as more details on the federal stimulus funds to the state, which are $3.3 billion. And once they have more information about that, the legislature will come back into session and look at reprioritizing, taking things out of the freezer and what might move forward. So we are sort of on pause with many of those things that did move forward this legislative session and for the immediate future. But we do know in terms of wins in that case is that the legislature has sent a message that they want these things done, and they have approved those steps. It also means that the governor has signed legislation, in particular the legislation that moved the child care services and funding from the Department of Social Services over to the Department of Education. So all of that collaboration and alignment work is going to continue. And the bill is signed. It was still on a plan, a sort of an expanded timeline where it wasn't to be completed until next July 2021. So my understanding is that it is going forward as planned. The bills are signed as planned, and they will continue to make every effort to move towards that collaboration and move everything under the Department of Education. So it is, sort of a mixed bag there in terms of some things are going forward. The VPI funding is on pause or frozen for now. And so what has come up since the coronavirus, as many of you are probably living, and I'm really interested in hearing more from your perspective on how things are shaking out in the New River Valley, is that the state has recommended that only childcare programs stay open to serve essential personnel, and has recommended a number of additional guidance in line with the CDC's guidance around safe care in childcare settings. And so those are the two steps that have moved forward. Just today, hours ago, literally at 2 o'clock, they made the announcement that the governor is going to put forward some of the federal money that was earmarked for childcare at the federal level to do 4 things. And there are in a, oh great, wow, that would turn into a beautiful slide, good job. They are listed in this press release that just went out, as well as all of anyone who is known to the DSS system should have gotten the materials, a letter from DSS, and the application for the grant funds in your inbox just this evening. So what the $70 million of additional federal funding will do is it's now available to start being pulled down right now. They're going to do a grant fund for providers who stayed open to serve essential personnel at least through June. There's a number, the grant application itself is not super onerous. It's a few pages, mostly check marks about how to apply to pull down those funds. The payment itself and the explanation is also not super generous, but it is something that will offset some of the costs. It's a sort of a little bit of a complicated formula that looks at overall program enrollment and multiplies that times, halves that and then multiplies it by $25 per student. So for example, if you were a program that had a capacity of 150 students, you would be eligible for a grant of $25 times half of your capacity, or 75 students, which equates to, I think, $1,875 a week in additional funding. And that is if you stay open, you get the additional funding. You might not be serving 75 students right now, but you would be eligible for that amount. And that would be fill out the application, get a check of a one-time payment. They have up to $33 million to use in that pot of funding. That's what they've estimated for the pot of funding for those programs that are staying open. The second thing is eliminating the co-payments for families through June. I believe either whether they're open or closed, a family that would have to have paid their subsidy co-payment is now waived, and the state is covering that portion. So the provider is not out the funding and the parent is not expected to pay. So that's a great win for parents and providers. I understand that's about $3 million of the total. Then schools that can act as emergency childcare centers or potentially collaborate with other programs like YMCA's, Parks and Rec, etc., to be emergency childcare programs. That direction is coming through the Department of Education to those school divisions. And so if in your community there are not enough providers, or particularly not enough school age providers, you may encourage your school divisions to take that option. Certainly a good option for programs where they're really targeted to serve preschool age or younger children, but you really need some space that's more conducive to school age children. And then the final piece is providing funding to programs that chose to close during this time period and had subsidy families enrolled. They are now eligible for, I believe it's 8 weeks of absent payments, as long as they submit some manual attendance absence paperwork. So they will not be out the state subsidy funding while they were closed. This action does not then affect any private tuition arrangements or private pay arrangements. It really is mostly, it's targeted to programs that closed and are receiving state subsidy funding, and then an incentive for programs that stayed open, whether they serve subsidy children or not, to get during this time through June. And so my understanding is those 4 actions really take up that $70 million of additional federal funding. They may not solve all of the problems of the childcare industry right now. And so I know that there are a number of other resources that are available to programs right now. The Early Childhood Foundation is putting together some resources. Childcare Aware is sending out some resources. There's information on payroll loans and unemployment resources and pay leave and other, and hopefully maybe even some local grants from other philanthropic organizations that are going to take some creativity and legwork for providers to access as well. But it is my understanding that if you are, whether you're a individual running a family day home or a larger center, that you are eligible for some of those loans and grants as well. So make sure that folks know and they're aware of having all of those resources available to them. They are complicated and they do require potentially, some good thinking and putting some collaborative strategies in place around making those different pieces of the puzzle work. I encourage everyone to be looking at those resources, talking amongst themselves as a community. I know there's a number of webinars that are available to different types of providers on the Early Childhood Foundation's website too, considering these financial strategies, and they've put out sort of a playbook of resources as well. So I think they have a COVID-19 page on the Early Childhood Foundation page to look at as well. With that said about the Early Childhood Foundation and the next steps, they've also pushed back some of the timeline for the federal preschool development grant work, but we're getting that funding and anticipate going forward. They're just giving a little bit more of a grace period for programs to respond during this time frame. So if there were groups in your community that were a part of the first round of the PDG, preschool development grant, or reapplying, those funds are still getting out the door and intended to be used. So a lot of the projects that were a part of that, the building the data systems and incentive payments and stuff, are also were to go forward as planned. So I think where we are in the early childhood space, the action today makes me feel a little bit better, calmer about that the state is looking out for some resources for the childcare sector in particular, and parents in particular. You know, this is a time where anxieties are heightened in every sector, and they should be here, parents and providers. So there will be a number of questions and pieces of the puzzle to continue to sort out. And that is where, we love hearing from folks on the ground as these policies now come to implementation, where there are still needs and what additional resources may be required. So some of the things that we're anticipating, we may hear from folks, is the formula for the essential workers. This incentive grant just didn't work to cover all the costs. If that is the case, we'd like to hear there really is no differential in there for higher cost of living, which may be an okay thing in the New River Valley, maybe less so in Northern Virginia. And hearing also about how this one-size approach does or doesn't work for different types of providers, if they're Head Start collaborations or family day homes, and if there's something that is missing in the puzzle. So we would like to hear that so that we can come back with the next round potentially being even more beneficial. And I'll say what has been the most beneficial, if there is to this workforce right now, is this idea that the state has endorsed the childcare workforce as essential personnel. And that there's a letter saying that childcare workforce is essential personnel and the services that are provided are essential. And to me, that is something that as advocates and folks working in the field, we can continue to hang our hat on and continue to use as an advocacy message. When things got crazy, it was childcare there that was essential to help the workforce move forward, to help our community stay strong, to help our community stay healthy. And we should continue to look for a sector to support the sector of childcare in the future. And so the opportunities that you have to sort of lift up your essential status as childcare providers is really important right now. I think the other thing that has been really helpful is the federal response here too. And we saw Senator Kane in particular going on a limb for some of the child care funding, and being able to make sure that got in the first round of this CARES Act package. And likely they'll come back for even more federal funding. That we're going to see how the federal money is being used to support the sector, if it is insufficient, and where we think federal and state legislators were moving that forward. Sorry, question? So the next steps, really, as I see it, are next week the General Assembly is meeting for its reconvened session to discuss changes in the budget and the bills that the governor made any amendments to. They're meeting outside in Richmond. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. They're going to be under a tent, and I don't know if they're just going to be streaming. What we're anticipating is that social media will play, as advocates, social media will play a big role of telling the stories that day. But if you do have a social media presence and are connected to your state elected officials, Delegate Hurst, Senator Edwards, he's in there so long, others, that use it to say thank you for getting the child care funding done. I don't anticipate it being controversial. And share your story of thank you for funding childcare. Childcare is essential to our community so that our families can work, so that the workforce can continue to keep their
like
job.
Over 3 pounds. Should I invite her?
Hey everybody, if you don't mind, please mute your line. We're getting a lot of feedback and background noise. So if you'll just all make sure, look at the bottom of your screen and make sure that you're on mute, please.
Thanks, Katie. So yeah, so that's the next step is to say thank you. Thank yous can also be directed to, as I mentioned, Senator Kane, delegates in your area, state senators in your area, the governor's office, the first lady, all of the commissioner of social services, all deserve thank you for this immediate action, and want to hear that these actions are helping the workforce. And then when it comes to looking at the next step of taking things out of the freezer and hitting the defrost button, we will, need to sort of go pivot and understand where the sector stands when things can open back up, if programs have closed, what stories we can tell, if new partnerships are needed, if school divisions are struggling to hire personnel. There'll be a number of stories to tell that will make the case for early childhood. And of course, there's also the stories. My son will be entering kindergarten this next year. Stories of how ready or not our students are, and what are the educational implications and school readiness implications of missing this educational period, and what are we facing that's going to require some immediate mitigation and some additional support for the early childhood community to help prepare kids. So those stories too of what creative educational resources that you all were able to come up with, or additional supports for kids potentially over the summer. Are also going to be sort of great stories, great examples. So that, to me, I think covers where we are in terms of this mix of policy at this time, and some uncertainty too. We're just so that you know too, the freeze, the pause applies to all new things in the budget. So additional community college money, parks, businesses. It's not just human services sectors, it's all things. What didn't apply to everything is that, and makes childcare special, is that they did put this federal money right into the budget and got it going so that the sector wasn't. And that is something to be very thankful for in the case of childcare. I don't know, I couldn't see if there are other questions.
Ashley, I think you've been kind of watching the chat box. I haven't seen anything pop up, but it's possible that something has. Let me see.
No, no, Katie, nothing has popped up so far.
Okay. So does anyone have any questions for Emily that they want to throw out there? If you want to unmute your line, or if you want to put it in the chat box, and then me or Ashley can read it out loud, whichever you're more comfortable with. We have a little bit of time that, if she's willing and able, could probably answer a few questions if anyone's got something. This new information from today is definitely, I think, really encouraging and really exciting for some of the providers that are both open and closed to kind of get that some relief to be able to address some of the tougher parts of this role. So I got to really see what this is looking like in practice, to have those lower ratio requirements and lower classroom numbers and that sort of thing. So I think this is really good news. Anyone have any questions or thoughts that they'd like to share?
I see the question about how long. Okay, I can see I pulled up the chat.
Awesome.
So another Emily asked about how long is the pause or freeze for? Would it open up for the next year of funding? And so we don't know exactly the timing of the pause and freeze. What we do know is that they said before they unfreeze anything, they will have to look at the new revenue projections for the state and how additional federal funding that's beyond this 60 million, it's 3.3 billion, are going to be plugged into the budget at the state level. So what we anticipate is before they hit the pause or unfreeze is that they have to look at those revenue projections and then come back for a special legislative session to consider those changes. And so I know right now they do monthly reforecasts of the budget, and that are kind of delayed. So we anticipate them not really having a post-COVID monthly forecast for another month or so. They will likely wait until, I'm guessing, June or July, maybe even August, to come back and revisit those pieces. So I don't necessarily anticipate that freeze being undone before the school year per se. So it will make like hiring, adding new staff, and everything very, very tricky if any division had planned to do that. If they had already planned, they had it in their budget and it's approved, then that's probably fine. What we've seen from local government systems, and I haven't been following the New River Valley very closely, but here in the Richmond area, in Northern Virginia, some of the other examples that we've looked at, is that most local governments have also put a freeze on their hiring practices, and some of them are also saying, we're going to come back and take this iterative look at the budget in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, and decide that they can open up. I think everybody's kind of operating on that mentality for now, and freezing any new services at this time period until they have a better sense of what the revenues look like. So we don't know exactly how long, but they will. But so our budget cycle in the state of Virginia is from July 1 forward. So we'll go into this new budget year, this July 1, with the freeze in place. The legislative session will meet obviously next January, February. And so by next July 1, they will have a special session look and another legislative session look where the initiatives will be sort of reconsidered. So probably at 2 periods of time, we'll have some legislative action on it. Okay, more questions coming in. Try to get to them. I see from Carol, can you say a bit more about what using schools as emergency child care centers is? And what might that look like? So I do encourage everyone to, sort of think creatively about this. I think they'd still have to, meet those 10 people per group limit in the other emergency child care situations. But the idea, I think, is really to use the space in the school, to use people who have already had some background checks or some portability for the background checks now, to staff up classrooms in schools. And my understanding here in the Richmond area, for example, the YMCA programs have collaborated with like Richmond Public Schools to get the word out to families about their services being open and to sort of funnel families to the YMCA services, even if they're not in the schools, and then look at what space is available and if they might need to go into schools as the YMCA provides services. So my understanding that in Virginia Beach, the Parks and Recs programs played a similar role of kind of opening up centers too. In Shenandoah, I believe, Shenandoah Public Schools, they've been using some classroom space as well. So there are a couple of examples. I think as the state gets these pieces up and running, they may point to some of those as examples as well, so other people can pull from. That's what I know. And then a pot of money will be available to schools when they're not licensed childcare programs to be able to get some of that essential funding for essential workers too. And I'll have to go back since I just got all of that's a great question. I'll find out more and to make sure to put it on our blog more. Like you, we're just reading the FAQ before this call too, about everything getting up and running. So Christy asked, with the new CARES Act grant funding, how much time is this covering through May, June, longer? All of the description of the FAQ for the CARES Act funding, the grants, and the payments for subsidy programs will close, reference April, May, and June as the time period. That will be another point of advocacy to have to address, but that is what the language is right now, is April, May, and June. I don't know why they didn't include March, but maybe as some programs were already mid-cycle in terms of what their payment practices were for March. Oops, am I missing one? How much communication are childcare providers receiving from the state to inform them of available resources? This is a good question. I know I'd be interested in hearing from you where there are gaps in communication. As far as I know, I have seen communications coming from Childcare Aware Virginia and its counterparts across the state. I have seen communications coming from the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation. I've seen communications coming from AUIC chapters to some degree or other associations. And then the information about, I think somebody references to, the CARES Act grant and the decisions that were just announced today came directly from licensing. I'm not sure if you get the email from the same person that I do, Edwina. Sent it to me. That's that I got it from today. Yes, and then there's also a VECF webinar on Friday with some state agency folks who answer questions directly. It's only open to 250 people at a specific time of 1:30 p.m. 1:30, I think, but it will be also available by recording as well if you're not able to listen to it then. And I imagine they'll also put some additional resources up. Great. Okay, and then Christy said she got one from both the subsidy side and one from licensing to all programs. Okay. So hopefully, I mean, I know this is such a tricky, getting the word out about this kind of stuff is really tricky, and we want to make sure that there's many resources as available to get the word out. I think different communities have been doing different things in terms of the capacity that they have as sort of backbone organizations. What I've seen in the Greater Richmond area is that the Greater Richmond Smart Beginnings is doing like a daily email blast to its stakeholders and providers to get the word out. The Northern Virginia AUIC, for example, is sharing a bunch of things with its membership. The Office for Children in Fairfax, which is, you know, souped up hub for childcare programs, is sending a number of resources. So I think it is sort of a place where the local community flavor, local community stakeholders and trusted voices are sort of left to figure out how to share those resources. Well, we'll put on our website the policy details and the policy actions that were taken. But you know, we want other people to turn to groups where they might go get technical assistance and training from to get a lot of those details. Let's see. I think, did I hit all the questions?
Yep, I think you did.
Okay, good.
All right. All right. Anything else anybody wants to throw in? Emily, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon or your evening, whatever time of day it is at this point, whatever day, whatever time of day you are in life. Yeah. We really appreciate you, though, giving us that information, and you're getting a chat. Thank you so much as well. So we really appreciate that. And of course, we would love for you to stay on and listen. It's all New River Valley focused stuff moving forward, but we also understand if you have to jump off and move on with your day. It is 7 o'clock in the evening. So, but we do really appreciate you joining us today for sure.
Thank you. I'm going to do early childhood bedtime. We've got some books and reading to do. But now that I have more details from the state on the actions that they took today, I will put it up on a blog. We will share it so that if other people want to share, is to send even our blog to your state legislators saying, thank you, these are important actions. We appreciate this step in the budget. That's a great, easy step that you can do for a legislative thank you.
Great.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
All right. So now we are going to kind of move into our work group updates. So we've got our 3 work groups, and we're going to have a speaker or 2 from each one, kind of depending on how they decided to break things up. To give you a little bit of an update on what they're doing, some ways that they are tackling our current situation, or ways that they're wanting to move on our current situation. And then also we'll talk a little bit at the end about how we feel like we can move forward or support y'all from a first steps perspective. So we are going to start with our Common Voice group, I do believe. Yep, and I think we have Kim Thomason speaking, and if I say the wrong person, just yell it out if you're wrong, but I'm going off what we wrote down yesterday. So I believe Kim Thomason is going to come in and speak related to our Common Voice.
Good evening, everybody. This is Kim, and I am here to talk just a smidge about Common Voice. Most of you know that we are meeting second Wednesdays of the month around 1 o'clock. Currently, that is going forward via Zoom. As the rest of the world is Zooming, we are too. With that, we are Zooming, but we are putting kind of a pin in our visioning process that we've been working on in the past couple of meetings and months to really focus in on advocacy efforts around the current COVID-19 and how we can support all areas of children and families. So just much like Voices, we try to be a work group that is multifaceted. We don't just focus on early childhood, but we are also trying to focus on mental health and physical wellness for families and children in the birth to 8 years. With that, our main focus currently is on advocacy through letter writing, much to what Emily just alluded to. We are putting together a letter that's being penned by a group member to go out as a collective whole from First Steps, but then also putting together a couple template drafts, if you will, that we can send out to educators, administrators, families, and as well as community members to also encourage them to contact their government officials, both state, local, and federal. So we will hope to have that out early next week. So check your inbox for that. So that's the main focus. With that, we also have group members that have kind of risen to the occasion and worked through getting some TV spots both today on both the NBC and CBS local channels. So look for those. We have some educators that were interviewed today about the challenges that they are facing with this crisis. So that was just a new development as of last night. And shout out to team members on making that happen and us in succeeding there. So looking forward to those. Those both, I do believe, will be also on those websites at around 9 o'clock tonight. So just focusing on advocacy efforts, we will join forces with Jess and the Greater Community Foundation and United Way here locally to also support some of our home providers with the needs that they need for their families in the coming weeks. So that's kind of the update on workforce and Common Voice, unless Megan has anything to add.
Thank you, Kim. You covered it all.
There we go. I couldn't get myself unmuted. Apparently I've talked enough today. I was being told I'm done. So thank you, Kim and Megan, and for that group for working so diligently. I think this creation of the advocacy letter has been something that you guys have really jumped on and tackled just head on, and that's not an easy task to come up with a letter that can speak from so many voices as we have in First Steps, and a template that can serve such different audiences. So thank y'all for working so hard on that. We really appreciate you helping us to have a voice, which is kind of what y'all are all about. So our next group is going to be our workforce group, and I believe we have Bonnie Graham, who's going to give an update on their work and their.
Katie and all. First, I'd like to thank the people that continue to work on this important issue of early childhood workforce and welcome other people to participate. Of course, we know it's one of the hardest issues to tackle and to address. The priority and call for action for workforce has been to strengthen the early childhood workforce as part of first steps. We began in September discussing why workforce is an important issue and how it impacts children, families, and also communities in the greater issue of economic development. We then began to gather information about our current and existing resources by listening to workforce-related groups on issues such as compensation and funding, professional development and credentials, early childhood systems and quality, perceptions and cultural dynamics related to early childhood, and finally, assets and resources that are available in the New River Valley. We believe our next steps are to continue to listen to people that serve children and families so we can grasp as a collective group a clear understanding of just the complexity of workforce in the New River Valley, hearing from people related to the care and education programs, agencies and organizations that support children and families outside of maybe direct care, but impact the care, research and professional development related to quality. A second next step for us would be to probably continue to identify and implement ways that support and strengthen our current programs and capitalize on current momentum in early childhood. And then third, and finally, to identify and address gaps in services or what are the barriers to a strong workforce. Through our collective thinking and capacity as a community group, some threads seem to stand out for the group, and they are to the strengths of a collaborative group and community of people that come together to work on an issue that we are all very passionate about and have had some very deep conversations and believe things that we believe so strongly in about the importance of the work to a thriving community. And a second thread we think is that we need to invest both wide and deep. We need strong participation from people across the New River Valley to build capacity of our entire valley. Some patterns that seem to be emerging in our research and listening sessions is the need to focus our work on perhaps the role of directors or administrators to this complex issue of compensation, quality, and capacity. Focus our work on demands of teachers, directors, and the workforce, the health and well-being of the workforce, and ongoing professional development. A second focus we think will be on the work on the importance of infant and toddler care, considering all the attention being given recently to 3- and 4-year-old programs. How does that leave infant and toddler providers in a hard place? And that turns us to the private providers and the hardship that that would create. And so workforces, again, is probably the most difficult early childhood issue to address, so we don't have any easy answers. I once heard someone say for every complex problem, there's a simple solution that's usually wrong, and so we want to be careful, but we feel like collaboratively we can work together on that. I'd like to end with two things that are just food for thought, that sometimes I'm a cliche person. So first of all, I'd encourage you to check out a new game. My family and I have discovered a game called The Forbidden Desert. If you haven't heard of that game before, it's talks about a thirst for survival, and I think it relates to our issue of workforce. In this board game, one of the things I like about it is that all the players coordinate and collaborate as a team to survive and get out of the desert. And so as we've talked about childcare being a desert, that game came to my mind. And as we think about the great role that First Steps has done in us working together as a collaborative team, that we move together forward. It is one of the few board games that I've played with everyone working together as a team to win. Everyone wins rather than competing with an individual winner. And my hope for early childhood workforce is that we collaborate to win, but we need everyone to participate and give us input for that. And then finally, I'll remind us of a quote that you all probably know well by Margaret Mead that says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
Sorry, my internet just about cut out, so I was having a moment over here. But thank you, Bonnie. And that game sounds like a really good team building game. So maybe that's something we can get for even for some of our centers and have a fun staff meeting where we get to just work together. All right. So our last group is the Info Hub working group. So some updates on that. And I just want to make sure, Andy, that's still my job, right? Just making sure you hadn't changed your mind. All right, her picture's not even on, so I'm gonna guess she's child wrangling and wants me to keep talking. All right, so a quick update on the Info Hub. So we have kind of previously for this year, we had decided that we wanted to continue some Meet Yourself sessions, but with a slightly new twist on how our traveling circus went about. So we had been looking at some specific agencies that have been hard to engage, whether it be scheduling or interests or availability. So we have been working with New River Community Services to get in a session with them that we were hoping to have around now, but obviously that's going to go on pause for a little bit. And then we had our collaborative meeting with Thrive and the kind of the food security network, which unfortunately also has been delayed at this point. So we do hope to go back and continue that resource building and expansion of networking once we are able to get back in person. But with those in-person sessions paused, the idea has been brought up to explore virtual Meet Yourself sessions. So that's what we kind of want to spend a little bit of time focusing on for the next little bit of this session today. So we have some poll questions that kind of are going to gather some information about these virtual Meet Yourself sessions. So I think those probably just popped up on your screen. They just popped up on mine at least, or question 1 did. Is it all of them? Okay. So there are going to be 5 questions that have popped up on your screen. And you guys can go ahead and do those now while you're looking at them. We are collecting that information into the system as we record this, and then we're going to go back and take a look at it. So what the goal was with these, the first 3 questions are really logistical planning questions. So when would you be available, what time, what day, and is this meaningful and interesting to you? And who's on the call. So it gives us some basic information about who's answering these questions for us and some planning information. The last 2 questions are by far the most important questions, because these are really the ones that tell us, what do you need? What does the meat of these Meet Yourself sessions need to be about? What topics are you looking for information on? So our goal and our thought around this is to do it very similar to our in-person Meet Yourself sessions. We would take topics according to how you guys answer those questions. We would spend some time finding speakers on those topics and resources on those topics, and then we would gather together via Zoom meetings to do that kind of lightning round presentation. Obviously, our networking is not going to be the way that it was before, but we're envisioning that we will be able to still provide some time for question and answer, and hopefully maybe even a way to kind of round robin introduce some people that are on the call so we can still develop some of that networking. So we'll work out those details over the next few weeks. But as I said, if that popped up on your screen, those first 3 questions are more logistical. For those last 2 questions, we really hoped we could have just open answers, and the polls for Zoom won't let you do that. So if those topics in question 4, if you have other really pressing issues for your organization, you can type those into the chat box, and we'll collect the data that way. So if your concern isn't listed, you can put it there. Also for question 5, you know, if you're hearing concerns from your clients that we didn't think of, please put that into the chat box, and we can gather that data in that way, as well. So we are going to attempt to kind of look at this, put it together, and see what are some of the top pressing issues, what are some of the top needs for clients, and then we can start offering some Meet Yourself sessions related to that. So instead of it being, you know, locality need based, this is going to be a more broad session where we can kind of look at the needs of the NRV as a whole. Additionally, we I had a thought and it went away. Additionally something, but I don't know, it went away. So I don't remember what that is. We are going to be looking at meeting in the next 2 weeks to kind of pull this together, and then sending out some dates and options for times. Oh, it's going to help us also, the client part. So the resources for clients and the things you're hearing you need from your clients is also going to help to give a little bit of direction in how we as first steps can possibly tackle some of the other needs. So while this is being collected under the Info Hub umbrella, we talked briefly yesterday that I think it's going to just give first steps some direction in general for action steps that we can take, or how we might be able to make sure that we're utilizing our work groups and our first step voice really well to make sure that we're getting resources met. So I think that the foundation has been approached with several different groups asking for things they need, or could they be a place to collect items, or how can we help with getting stuff out to clients. So this is going to just help also give some direction for what help can we tackle, and what can we do, and logistically what can we work with. So it'll give a lot of direction, I think, for the next month or so of first steps in general. Any questions about those poll questions? Anyone have any problems with those? All right, so that's kind of all that we have for Info Hub. And Jess, if you want to switch over to the slide with the little quote, we do have some time for questions and answers, so we can definitely open up the floor for a minute. But I was kind of looking for something a little inspirational for kind of ending our conversation. And like I said, we have some time for questions and answers, so don't run away just yet. But you know, I think that this was a really nice one. So it says, I will breathe. I will think of solutions. I will not let my worry control me. I will not let my stress level break me. I will simply breathe, and it will be okay, because I don't quit. Do this a lot. So COVID-19 is not the first time that we've had to take a breath and not quit. So, you know, I really want to applaud. We have 27 people on the call. It is 7:30 at night, and you've been living on Zoom meetings, and you're here. We're not quitters, and this isn't going to be the thing that breaks us or makes us quit. So while I know that this is such an incredibly stressful time, and I know that there are days that you feel like this has to end, or I am going to quit, I can't do anymore, take that breath, give yourself a break, give yourself grace, and know that tomorrow you are going to wake up and you are going to do it again, and you're going to kill it, because that's what we do. That's all we can do. And we do it every day for a million different reasons. So I just really want to thank everybody for being here. And I want to thank you for continuing to fight this battle. And whether it's COVID-19, or it's not enough funding, or it's, you know, kids whose behaviors are just becoming different and more challenging, or it's a lack of leadership, or what it is, you know, we keep doing this, and I just thank you for continuing to be a part of First Steps, and a part of this field, and a part of this amazing work that we're doing. So thank you, and breathe. We're going to make it through this together, and we're going to come out really strong on the other side. So thank you all for being a part of this fight. We do have time for questions, so if anybody's got anything that is needed, or that you are wanting to know more about, or something you wanted to add to what we've already talked about, the floor is open.
Katie, this is Bonnie. I just wanted to say thank you for those words. They are so much like you. You really do live and breathe that.
All right, if we don't have any further questions, we will let everybody kind of get on with your night. And if you're like me and haven't had dinner yet, go eat some dinner. Take care of yourself. So we will collect the data that you guys shared for that second half. I think we're also going to be sending out a blast. Jess, I don't know if we decided to do it soon, but I think this was seeing data or another slide with that resource page and when our meetings are, that sort of thing. So we're putting a blast. Everyone has invitations to Zoom meetings as we're continuing to work. And once we have some y'all need from me or Jess, anything I've forgotten?
I think you did.
All right. We'll see you again.
Did a great job. Thank you, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you, everyone.